Liverpool are into the Champions League final after they beat Villarreal 3-2 on the night and 5-2 on aggregate in an absolute rollercoaster of an evening. Well, after a nightmare start to proceedings and finding themselves 2-0 down at half-time and level on the tie, a dramatic turnaround with goals from Fabinho, Luis Diaz and Sadio Mane spun the tie on its head. Welcome along, everyone. You're watching the Debrief live on the Blood Red channel, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo with me, Patrick Smith, and joining me to react to that deranged, crazy match is Matt Addison. So, Matt, what a night, what a turnaround.
Yeah, a game of two halves, if ever there was one, for sure. Liverpool never, ever make these things easy, do they? It's always got to be a little bit more complicated than it should have been. I think the first half, there's no getting away from it. It's the worst that they played for a long, long time. They were absolutely atrocious. And I think, obviously, when you go into these matches, Villarreal are going to give it everything. It was, a chance of a lifetime for them, even though they were 2 goals down. The crowd go into it thinking that there's a chance, and Liverpool did everything they could really to make that true. They gave them the 2 goals. They managed to play as bad as what I can remember them doing for a long, long time. There's, you could literally go through the team. I know Naby Keita's got a fair bit of stick for the first half, but you could literally go through, each and every one of those players was nowhere near. And so for that reason, I think the second half, the turnaround, the goals come at the right time. They obviously played a lot better. I think Luis Diaz was, instrumental in turning that round. And I think they deserve a lot of credit really for that. I think, it would be easy to have a go at them for the first half, but I think you've got to give the tie and the game in context. If you'd have said to anyone at halftime that the last few minutes Villarreal would just basically have given up, I think, most people would have laughed. So, for Liverpool to show the mental strength, the ability to turn that tie around, I think second half was so much better. That was what it should have been in the first half. But hopefully, as they continue to go for this quadruple, maybe that can be the kind of the little wake up call if they needed one. They've got away with one. I think that's certainly a fair way of saying it. Obviously deserving of it in the second half, but they could have been more than 2 goals down in the first. The fact that they've come back, they've got themselves into the Champions League final. I would be very, very surprised if they play as badly as what they did in that first half again this season.
Well, with that first half, I'm tempted to just ignore it because it doesn't matter now. We're through to the final, but we've got to start with Matt. I'm going to go into a bit more depth on that. Villarreal were brilliant. They pressed us very high up. Completely different side to what we saw last week. Were Liverpool terrible or Villarreal just difficult to cope with?
A little bit of both. I think Liverpool played into their hands. I mean, they just couldn't string any passes together, could they? It took them nearly an hour to put more than about 5 passes together. And I think that's the absolute classic thing when you go into a European away game. The first thing you want to do is just keep the possession, keep the ball, keep it simple, make their crowd a little bit quieter. Obviously, there's been a big build-up to it. It's a massive event for them. It's the biggest game of their history. It's the biggest game probably that those players will ever play in. I think 1 or 2 of them might go on and go to bigger clubs and maybe get that opportunity. But generally speaking, those players, that was kind of it for them tonight. That was their big occasion. And for Liverpool to just kind of let them play around them, I don't think was particularly brilliant. I think you even look at people like Van Dijk and Thiago, who normally are so calm and know exactly what they need to do. They've been in those situations countless times. Even they looked a little bit flustered at times. So that wasn't ideal. But then, of course, you've got to give Villarreal a bit of credit as well. I think, obviously, Gerard Moreno being back was a huge thing for them. Obviously, they had, a number of chances in that first half that they created, but also Liverpool helped them. So it was a little bit of both. It would have been interesting to see kind of what they did. If Liverpool had played at their absolute best in that first half, I think you still would have seen Villarreal come out of the traps quickly and go for it. But I think, the goal, 2.5, 3 minutes into the game, I think that was the worst possible start for Liverpool, and it just kind of got worse from there, really. So, they got away with it a little bit, I think, in terms of that. It could easily have been more than 2 goals in that first half. But like I said before, the fact that they've turned it around, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so strangely uncharacteristic, even seeing Thiago miss a few passes. But their 2 goals were taken in fairness. But I'm going to move on, Matt, to the man of the night, the signing of the season for me, Luis Diaz. My word, what an introduction. Unlucky not to start tonight, but he proved a point, didn't he?
Yeah, he certainly did. And I think in terms of, you look at the bigger games coming up now, you look at the Champions League final, we can now talk about that and sort of plan ahead for that. I think you'd be very surprised if Luis Diaz wasn't in it. I think Diogo Jota was a little bit unlucky to come off in the first half. It could literally have been any of the outfield players, if we're being honest. The change could have been for any of them, but you saw the impact that Luis Diaz made. I mean, I mentioned before that Liverpool couldn't string any passes together, but the one thing that Luis Diaz can do is you can just give him the ball and no one can get it off him. It wasn't necessarily sort of holding the play up by passing. It was more a case of just him holding the ball and trying to dribble around a few people. But that was what Liverpool needed. They needed that option to get them up the pitch. And Diogo Jota isn't necessarily the player to do that. He's obviously very good when he's inside the penalty area, but Liverpool just couldn't get anywhere near that for that to be the case when he was on the field. So, yeah, it was an inspired move. I think most people, myself included, probably would have brought Jordan Henderson on at half time. Obviously, in the end, doesn't come on until 10 minutes until the end. I think Jurgen Klopp got that decision absolutely spot on. I think for Diaz to come on and just settle everyone down really with his ability just to keep hold of the ball. Obviously, took a couple of shots, had a couple of dribbles to try and get past his man, but yeah, for me, it was just the fact that Liverpool could keep hold of the ball for a few seconds. That was the big difference, really. And obviously, when you do that, you can then bring the others into play. They've got a bit more time. That knock-on effect is absolutely enormous. So, yeah, the absolute game changer, the perfect substitution. Probably Liverpool fans would have maybe made one or two more subs in that moment. Obviously, in the heat of the moment, it's easy to think that everything needs to change. But thankfully, Jurgen Klopp and his coaching staff know best. And, they made the right decisions at the right time. I think, you could maybe make the argument that possibly Diaz should have started and that was a mistake from them to begin with. But I think, to be fair to them, you couldn't really have anticipated Liverpool playing quite so poorly. So, yeah, the right decisions in game at the right moment. And thankfully, yeah, Luis Diaz is the man really to have fired Liverpool into the final.
I mean, a game-changing substitution that got us higher up the pitch and eventually led to that crucial goal for Liverpool. Fabinho, a very well taken finish, Matt, wasn't it? And probably the crucial moment in the tie that really swung it back in our favour, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the exact thing that I wanted Liverpool to do, really. I mean, we saw in the first leg that Rooney, the Villarreal goalkeeper, just basically flapped at everything, tried to punch things clear all of the time and just wasn't particularly convincing. But Liverpool just didn't really get near him in that first half. They knew, I'm sure, if they could have tested him, that there was an opportunity for things like that to happen. And we saw it, 3 times, didn't we, for each of the goals. There was some strange decision-making from him, his legs too far apart or his legs halfway up the pitch, as it was for the Sadio Mane one. I mean, he's a very, very, very poor goalkeeper at this level relative to what you'd normally come up against. And as soon as Liverpool did start to put some shots at the goal, you could see, exactly what was going to happen. So, yeah, it was a good finish from Fabinho. It was a good decision. I think he referenced it just then on BT Sport post-match and said he saw somebody in the box but thought that they were offside. So he just thought, might as well have a go. And thankfully he did. I think that was a really, really key moment. I think obviously the first goal in this game was going to be big. Liverpool obviously give that away straight away. But I think the first goal of the second half was just as big, to be honest. The fact that Liverpool get themselves back into it. If they'd have gone 3-0 down, then you really are starting to panic. But I think once they got that goal, got themselves kind of back into the tie again in terms of getting themselves an advantage. Yeah, absolutely enormous goal for them. Really well taken. But yeah, I'm sure the goalkeeper will be having a few sleepless nights because, yeah, if they had someone competent in goal, they could have completed the job today.
Well, I'm going to touch on that because the third goal, Matt, is one of the strangest things I've seen. I think Sergio Senjo on the bench is a very competent goalkeeper. I think he'll feel hard done by not to be starting. The first 2 goals, he's been nutmegged. Okay, he can't do too much about them necessarily. But the third goal, Matt, I mean, it's very well taken by Mane. A lovely finish, rounded the keeper and the defender. But what is really doing there?
Well, yeah, exactly. I've no idea what he's doing. I don't think he does. I think he's got a little bit carried away, and I think that's what we knew about Villarreal, is that they would give it everything, but they're not as good as a team as Liverpool. They're not, at the same level. And as soon as Liverpool showed any kind of, real true version of themselves, they really did start to run riot. So, yeah, we knew the kind of frantic atmosphere could go one or two ways. It could, as it did in the first half, really unsettle Liverpool and really help Villarreal. In the second half, they were kind of having to chase it by the end because of one or two errors that they'd made, and that's kind of caught up with them in the end. So yeah, it was a good finish, good moment for Sadio Mane. Really by that point, I think the tie was pretty much done anyway. But just to seal it and make it a nice easy end for Liverpool, certainly no bad thing. So yeah, great for him to get a goal. Great for Liverpool to not just sort of win the tie, but win the game as well. I think it was really important for them to put in a much better performance in that second half. It's, in the end, not one where they've kind of got away with it and fluked their way through to the final. They kind of, the last sort of half an hour of that game, you were fairly comfortable that they were going to do it. So, yeah, that was big. Much better in the second half, much helped by their goalkeeper.
Well, Matt, we've booked our place in Paris. Now the question is, who do you think we're going to face in the final? Is it going to be a repeat of the 1981 final, or is it going to be that nightmare final against City that we're all dreading?
Yeah, I certainly hope that Manchester City are not in the final. I think that would make it a lot more of a spectacle, if nothing else. Obviously, from a Liverpool perspective, I think it'd be easier for them to go up against Real Madrid. But I think, a Liverpool-Real Madrid final, there's a kind of historical relevancy to that. There's a kind of romance to it. There's even, you think back to 2018 and what happened in Kiev, for Liverpool to have that kind of storyline and the narrative around them, being able to put that right, I think would be the best final really for neutrals. I think obviously a Liverpool and Manchester City final would be a bit more of a nerve-wracking one. It certainly wouldn't be one that obviously you don't want to lose a Champions League final, but particularly against Manchester City, that would be a very tough one to take. But yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? Liverpool and Manchester City are the two best teams in the world at the moment, so we shouldn't be that shocked if City do go through. I do still have a sneaking suspicion that Real Madrid might do it, to be honest. I think they've got just the extra experience, the extra kind of nous within that competition. I think Manchester City, it's inevitable that they will win the competition eventually, but there is, until they do that, always going to be a little bit of a question mark, I think, over their mentality and their ability to get through to the final. So, yeah, for Liverpool, the important thing is that they're there. They can't have any influence tomorrow night, but at least we now can sit back, relax, enjoy tomorrow night's semi-final, and whatever the outcome, we know that whichever one of those two teams wins, Liverpool are going to give them a real game, even if it is Manchester City. I mean, you only have to look back a couple of weeks to that game at Wembley. Liverpool can just blow them away. So, yeah, whoever it is, it's going to be a great final. But the good news for Liverpool is that they will definitely be in it. Yeah,
exactly. I think we have every right to be optimistic. Personally, I think it's going to be a case of the last dance for those Real Madrid boys of Benzema, Kroos, Modric, etc. But Matt, that is all we've got time for today. It's going to be a long evening of celebrations, I'm sure, for Reds all around the world as Liverpool reach the Champions League final for the third time in just 5 years. What a time it is to be a Red. So drink it in and savour it, everyone. Stick around on the Blood Red channel, though, shortly, as we'll bring you Jurgen Klopp and hopefully a players' press conferences. But until Saturday evening's Premier League clash against Tottenham, when we return with the debrief, it's goodbye for now.